Last week, I thrifted this really pretty Art Deco era chest of drawers that doesn't look too bad from a distance, but when you get up close, you can see that it's definitely in need of some repair. My intention is to fix what I can before it gets any worse and give this little piece of history a fresh new finish that will protect it well into the future. Art Deco furniture like this was popular from the 1920s all the way through the 40s and is known for its bold geometric shapes and rich wood finishes that were influenced by the new machine age and all the fancy skyscrapers that were appearing across the globe. The burled wood grain on the top drawer of this chest is stunning, and I also love the tall cathedral grains running up the front. The brass hardware is super unique, and I'm excited that all of the pieces are still here and working properly, but there are some pretty bad issues happening around the edges of this piece. These massive chunks of missing veneer that have been colored in with a furniture marker and lots of smaller chips kind of everywhere. A few around the top edge, a few around the bottom edge, and a piece out of this trim too. When I open the drawers, I can see that there's some rubbing happening, which will only help peel the veneer off of here faster. See here where it's already letting go from the board underneath? All this stuff needs to be dealt with so that the chest can keep being used and doesn't eventually end up in a burn pile somewhere. I'm going to start by pulling out all the drawers, removing the hardware, which I'll just collect into a little baggie so I don't lose anything, and then take a nice close-up look at each drawer, its guide, and the corresponding part in the dresser frame so that I can try and figure out where things are going wrong.
Oh, hey. I wonder if that fits on the side. Look at that. That's a score. I think that's Keeler, Brasco, Grand Rapids. Cool. Those are pretty. They should clean up well.
So these drawers are wood on wood construction, meaning there's a wood track on the bottom of each drawer that slides along a wood rail inside the cabinet. And they're all in really good condition considering the age of this thing. There's a little bit of wear down each rail from the metal nail head in the tracks, but it hasn't dug in or worn down as much as I've seen on a lot of other pieces. There is a lot of dust in here though, so I'm gonna give that all a quick vacuum and wipe off. Usually this is where I start cleaning my pieces to remove any old furniture polish or wax residue, but since I'm planning on keeping this wood grain and not painting anything, and I'm dealing with a really thin, fragile veneer, I want to get the existing finish off in the most gentle way possible, which I think is probably going to be a chemical stripper. Furniture from this time period is usually sealed with either shellac or a lacquer, so I grabbed some denatured alcohol and lacquer thinner to see if either of those would eat through it. Alcohol will break up a shellac finish, but this little test spot didn't do too much. The lacquer thinner did eat through the finish a bit more, but still wasn't doing what I'd expect if this was a lacquered finish. So I'm not really sure what it is. I ended up deciding to go with this all-around furniture and finish stripper and see what it would do. This Green Easy is an eco-friendly product that I've been having really good luck with lately, even though the first time I used it on some paint, it didn't really perform. That's the thing about strippers though. Not every stripper will work on every finish, so sometimes you just have to do a bit of experimenting. This stuff gets a liberal coat brushed over every surface, and it's a nice thick gel consistency, so it does stick pretty well to vertical surfaces too. And then it needs between 2 and 4 hours just to sit there and work its magic before you can start scraping it back. Hello, that looks like it's ready to come away. I grabbed a flexible metal putty knife to scrape and just a piece of recycling to collect all the goop in. This stuff on the top was so sticky and thick. I ended up brushing on another layer of stripper and just giving it some more time while I worked on the rest of the dresser, but the finish on the drawers and the sides of the dresser all cleaned up just like I was hoping. Green Easy also has an afterwash or finishing cleaner, which helps remove all the oils that are in the stripper and get the surface spick and span. So I sprayed that on, used a little scrubby pad to clean off any residue, and then wiped everything down one more time with some clean water. There was a lot of finish left on the top, but I figured I could remove whatever was hanging on there with my sander once all the wood had dried back out. Look at the grain on this side. These waves in the wood are called quilting. It's so pretty. Before I went to bed that night, I wanted to deal with all of the loose bits so that the glue could dry really well overnight. So I filled up a blunt-tipped glue syringe with some regular old wood glue and then just went around each edge with my painter's tool to pry up any bits that had let go of the board underneath, squeeze the glue under there as far as I could get it, and then kind of smush it all around to make sure everything was coated. Then I just used some scrap wood and paint stir sticks to clamp up each repair with nice even pressure. And putting a little bit of painter's tape down either over your repair or just wrapping it around the block helps keep from gluing your boards to the veneer. You don't want those sticking together. The next morning, once all of my repairs were nice and dry, I was ready to start filling in all the spots of missing veneer. You could cut these out and place a new piece of veneer, but I opted to use some wood filler that I'll just camouflage a little later on. I thought it would be easier to blend that into the wood grain around it than sticking a completely different piece of wood in there would be. This is a 2-part epoxy filler. It comes in this tube and you can just break off the amount that you need, mix the 2 different colored components together, and then mold it into your imperfection. It does start to harden and cure up about 90 seconds after you mix it, so you need to work quickly and don't mix up more than you can get placed in that time. It's really tough once it's dry though, so I love to use it for bigger repairs like these. For all the smaller chips and any cracks, I opted for this walnut colored wood filler instead. It's just a little more mobile than the putty and easier to get down into the finer stuff. Once all the filler was dry, I popped some 180 grit sandpaper onto my detail sander to start smoothing things out. Again, since this veneer is really thin, I don't want to be grinding away too much of it. It'll disappear really fast on you, so the 180 grit should be gentle enough to prevent that, but still let me remove all the excess filler at the same time. Since I didn't see any reason on the inside of the dresser for the drawers to be rubbing against each other, I decided to use the sander to just remove 1 millimeter or so of the wood off the top and bottom edges of each drawer to give them a bit more clearance when they're opening and closing. And while I was at it, I also sanded the sides and insides of each drawer to clean those up too. With all the finish left on the top, I made sure to really take my time and go super slowly over each patch to grind that away, but being extra cautious not to blow through the veneer. I still don't know what this junk was, but it did not want to let go of the top. With everything sanded back to raw wood, I wiped off any dust with a dry microfiber cloth and then put on my respirator because the rest of this project is gonna be stinky. I'm going to reseal all of this gorgeous walnut wood grain with some vinyl sealer, which is kind of like a primer for the new lacquered finish that I'm ultimately going to be putting on here. I like to use one of these spray can handles when I'm doing big surfaces like this because it's way easier on my hands and fingers and really helps me to get more of a steady, continuous spray out of the can. And I just went over each surface, overlapping each pass a little bit, trying to get an even layer. This is gonna bring the real color of the wood out so I can match my repairs to it and give a good base, like I said, for the final lacquer finish to stick to. With all of this sealer dry, I'm ready to start working on camouflaging all of my repairs. And I'm using a new to me product. I finally ordered myself a set of these blend-all sticks for Mohawk. They're kind of like wood crayons and they're made specifically for this purpose. Like I said, this is my first time using these sticks, but I've learned all about them and how I can use them from my brilliant friend Erin at Refurbishedish. She's got this whole process locked down. So if you want to learn more about these, please go check her out. I'll leave all her links in the description for you. Basically, I'm just coloring in these patches with a few different shades that match the wood tones around them, blending it in with my finger and then sealing in each layer of color that I add with a quick spray of lacquer to keep things from moving around or blending too much. The lacquer dries really fast, it just takes a few minutes, so I just kept moving my way around from spot to spot, adding one layer at a time until I thought it looked right. I think I probably spent about 2 hours out in the garage fussing with all this, and it's definitely a skill that takes some practice to be really good at, but this is where I decided to stop. Not perfect, but I still had a few more steps to go. These are tiny little graining pens or markers. I have one in black and one in a dark brown, and I just use these to replicate the grain lines in the wood. Again, trying to follow what I was seeing happening in the wood around these repairs, but definitely another thing I need more practice at. To deal with the exposed maple edges around the trim and drawers that is lighter and was originally just painted dark brown, I used a few little touch-up paints in similar shades on an artist brush to fill all that in. And then to hide the repairs even further and richen up the overall tone of the wood, I sprayed on a few coats of this toner, which is a clear or transparent, I suppose, brown coat. These cans take some practice too, because it's kind of hard to see that they're making any difference, and then they get way out of hand, out of nowhere. So you want to be sure to apply really light, kind of misting coats and build up the color slowly. I also find that it helps to make sure you're spraying in the same direction as the wood grain to help avoid any weird streaks or striping going the wrong way. While the toner finished drying, I brought the handles inside to start soaking them in a nice bath of cleaning vinegar and hot water to break up all the tarnish and gunk that was on there. And then once the water was cool enough for me to handle things again, I scrubbed and polished them all back to this beautiful bright gold with some Barkeeper's Friend and 4/0 steel wool. The last layer to finish all this off is the lacquer. I'm going with a satin sheen, and again, it comes in these handy little spray cans. You always want to give these cans a really good shake before you use them and as you're using them. And again, I sprayed a layer over each surface, overlapping each pass by about 50%. This stuff is dry enough to recoat in about 30 minutes. So although it does usually need a few more layers to build up a good layer of protection than say a polyurethane does, it really doesn't take too long. I ended up using 2 cans of this and applying a total of 5 coats. And I just wiped each dried coat down with a super fine sanding pad to knock off any little dust particles or rough spots that had dried in it. Wiped off the dust with a clean microfiber cloth and sprayed on the next. To finish off these drawers, I rubbed some of this Feed and Wax wood conditioner into the bare wood with a wax brush, but an old rag works just as well, and then wiped off any excess that hadn't soaked in. I also put some of this onto the drawer slides to lubricate them a bit and keep everything sliding nicely. Okay, it's time to take a look back at this Art Deco chest of drawers that I found out thrifting. Again, not bad from afar, but not so great up close, and soon to be a lot worse if someone didn't make repairs to all of the loose veneer. Some wood glue and a lot of arts and crafts later, now it's looking like this. I can't say I'm a pro at these kind of repairs, but practice makes perfect, and if we never try, we'll never learn. I do know that this piece is way better off than it was, and hopefully now someone can love having it inside their home again for another generation or two. Thank you so much for hanging out with me through this one. I always appreciate you being here. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will catch you all next time.